Hello there and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily, your go-to podcast for everything soilless cultivation. I'm your host, Dr. Russell Sharp, and today we're going to be talking about hydroponics in schools. Now, there are a number of people and organizations running hydroponics in schools, and I wanted to go through the benefits and the disadvantages of growing hydroponics in schools. There are a number of projects looking at supplying food into school canteens to supplement diets of pupils and teachers, and this is obviously a potential benefit. Now, you can grow some amount of food. You probably couldn't supply all the food required for a school. You would need a significant farm to do that, and it would be pretty expensive compared to the budgets that schools get for feeding their children. Certainly in the UK, the budgets are tiny, so you couldn't really set up a small hydroponic farm on the budget. In the UK, I know my local school here, the catering department is run by a company that is owned by Denise Coates, she owns Bet365. This company makes millions of pounds a year. Denise Coates makes millions of pounds a year, and she's a billionaire. And they don't run this company as a charity, and the kids get a very, very small budget. So it's unlikely that Denise Coates is going to invest in hydroponics for her school catering company that dominates the UK. She's a piece of work if you look into her. So yeah, she doesn't pay anywhere near as much in tax as she should, and as many billionaires are like that. So why might you invest in hydroponics in a school if it's not economical to use it to feed children? Well, it's a good educational source as well. So it's a good source of learning. Obviously, kids learn about growing food in school, both in primary and senior school. You hear a lot of reports saying, they should teach kids how to grow food in schools. Or, every week I get sick of it. Another one, they should teach kids practical skills in school. They should teach kids, British values. They should teach kids, how about teaching them just the basics of how to actually do maths and write? We could start there, couldn't we? That might help UK and worldwide productivity if we could just get the basics right, rather than, saying, they should teach kids, how to play, handball or something like that. I've gone off a divergent. Hydroponics. What can it add other than getting a load of soil in and having an allotment in the school and growing vegetables directly in the soil? Well, it can showcase new and innovative and scientific methods. That's the key thing here. So you could grow in the soil. You could have an allotment, and that could be good for food science and what used to be called home economics and sort of basic budgeting and things like this. It could be used for biology, but at the end of the day, hydroponics involves engineering and involves a lot of maths and precision. And so you can teach a lot more with a hydroponic setup. And also it's 12 months of the year. If you think about a school term time, then they can potentially, or certainly even a university, they can be away from the physical site of education when most plants are growing. So it provides 12 months a year opportunity to grow crops, and they can see a result in a few weeks if you're growing something like a lettuce or some microgreens or some leafy greens, things like this. So it's a really good opportunity to sort of not gamify, but get a quick reward for their efforts, for the pupils' efforts. Whereas if you're growing cabbages, they will have forgotten that they planted a cabbage in September, and then it comes round to February and it's time to harvest it. The other opportunities, obviously, there's a lot of maths. There's units and measurements and things like this that you have to get right, otherwise the plants die. There's a lot of chemistry involved. So you've got all the elements on the periodic table. A lot of them are involved in growing plants. So there's the 12 essential macronutrients and micronutrients. There's things like silicon that are additive to and beneficial to plants' growth. Then there's the toxins like sodium and arsenic and cobalt and nickel and things like this. So there's a there's a large aspect of chemistry. There's also agrochemicals, pesticides, biostimulants that you can bring in organic chemistry into. And there's also, if you're interested in the chemistry, then check out our periodic table of plant health. That's free to download from our website. Just type periodic table of plant health into Google and Utrema. Even without Utrema, it might still come up, and you can get a free download there of this big poster that can be printed off. If you're in a UK school and you'd like a copy of that poster, I can send you a hard copy as well. So there's the chemistry aspect, there's the maths aspect, there's obviously there's the biology. It's not just the biology, the pests and the beneficial organisms is the big area you can feed into there, and you can use that. There's physics, obviously there's the engineering, and also you can link it into space exploration. In geography, you could link it to sort of the human geography aspect. There's the ability to grow crops on islands with toxic soils. So things like New Caledonia, where they have something called I think it's a serpentine soil, which is very high in heavy metals. Can't grow there. The Antarctic, and then space exploration and Mars colonization that feeds into physics. So that's really good for like a physics after school club, things like that. And then there's the business aspect as well. So you can teach kids about basic business techniques using hydroponics, and they can sell the things that they grow, and they can work out their margins for that. So very, very useful for ornamental plants. Like there's a couple of schools in the UK that grow orchids commercially, and they've been very successful. Orchids by their nature are hydroponic because the epiphytic orchids that live in trees don't actually grow in soil. So they by their very nature are hydroponic, and it's hydroponic cultivation in bark. And it's mainly broken bits of bark is what they grow in. So that's one hydroponic setup that's being used in schools. The other advantage of just growing plants in the soil is that you can grow more exotic plants, and it looks cool as well. So having things that look cool is always good when it comes to teaching people and making them interested in things. So both from the student's perspective, they'd rather be in a warm greenhouse or in a grow room on a winter's day than out digging holes in the cold. Trust me, I've been a horticultural lecturer. It's a lot more enjoyable in the greenhouse than it is outdoors digging a hole. And on open days and things like this, so if you're a private school, then you can attract pupils, and more importantly, their parents, by having a really cool setup with moving parts and LED lights and things like this, and fans and water gushing round and pumps, than you could with just some plants in plant pots. So I'd say that it's easy to dismiss that, but it's actually a major point. Things that can attract people to go to your school and get a good intake of students can be make or break for a school. Lots of schools are going bust here in the UK because they've put tax on the fees that they're paid. And if you can attract more people to your school by having hydroponics in the biology lab, then that could be a win-win, and you could become famous for it. You could be the school that grows crops hydroponically and feeds their pupils. Even if it's a few heads of lettuce every week, it's still a good news story. And you might struggle for space, but there's one school here near Leicester that's just set up an e-gaming suite for their students. So they've got the room for that. I'm sure they've got the room for a hydroponics unit and grow room. So have you grown hydroponics in your school? Any school that your kids go to? Was it a success? Was it a failure? Obviously, it's going to live and die by the enthusiasm of the teachers and the adult helpers and the PTA and the pupils. If they don't have, if one of those is lacking in enthusiasm, and the head teacher as well, if one of those is lacking enthusiasm, then it could die a death. But it's certainly a very good learning resource for kids if it's done right. So let me know your thoughts. So my computer there just decided it was going to do a update, and that took about 20 minutes. So I've forgotten what I was going to talk about next. Anyway, additional advantages of hydroponics as a learning tool in schools. Hands-on learning for science, few and far between. Opportunities for growing plants and teaching about photosynthesis and things like this in schools. It's often a very, very small aspect of the curriculum. So hydroponics can really help with that, making biology lessons more fun when it comes to plants. It promotes critical thinking and problem solving. That hydroponics is just solving one problem after another until you will finally get to a crop. So that's that. Encourages sustainability awareness, really, especially water conservation. In the UK, we have ample amounts of rain, but in other areas, hydroponics is a really good way of saving water. Can talk about food security, so that'll feed into a lot of geography lessons and sustainable agricultural practices. And we've talked about the cross-curricular connections between maths and economics and business, things like this. And as I said, if it's after-school clubs and business clubs and things like this, then it increases student engagement. And so that's a good point there. And teamwork as well, encouraging teamwork. One really good point is if you've got an urban school where there might not even be a playground, or if the playground is just tarmac, like schools in London, for example, or Birmingham, then hydroponic systems can be set up to provide some green space. You could have a green wall in a school where you would normally, it would break up the concrete and provide some plants for the students to look at. So that's a really important point. We've talked about that, environmental, entrepreneurial, partnerships with local businesses and universities. We saw that, talked previously about that tie-up between Swansea University and the local schools. No, it wasn't Swansea, was it? It was Wrexham, where Ryan Reynolds hangs out. The Wrexham University and the local schools where they were growing all the different crops required to make a pizza. And it was space pizza they were looking at for, growing food in space or on Mars. So it's a really good tie-in with local universities. If any local schools want to get involved with Utrema, as I say, we can provide posters, we can provide fertilizer, and depending on the project, depending on the school, really. So get in touch if that's the case. And finally, it's a great gateway to green careers. Introduces students to emerging fields such as vertical farming, ag tech, food science, biopesticides, all the areas that are going to be big as we go into the next few decades, compared with what is the current situation in high schools or senior schools here in the UK, where horticulture is seen where you put the dumb kids into. So if you fail your GCSEs, or it looks like you're going to fail your GCSEs, you get put on a Royal Horticultural Society course, an RHS course. And this means that you still get a qualification, but you're not put into the GCSE league tables, and the school gets bumped up the league tables because they've got rid of all the thick kids and the underperforming kids. And so this results in a lot of people getting horticultural qualifications and the horticultural industry getting flooded with people who aren't very good, where really we want the top of the top, because it should be an industry that is extremely scientific and business-led and attracts people who can problem solve using lateral thinking and from different aspects of science, maths, business, the environment, things like this. So hopefully hydroponics could encourage that in schools and make the teachers see that horticulture and agriculture is not where you just send the divvies. It's where you actually send people who've got real potential. Because if you think about it, a plant has thousands times more genes than a human does. It has thousands of times more chemicals and biochemical processes, and there are 200,000 species of plant and only one species of human. So if you think about, well, let's send the clever kids to do medicine. Well, one human is a really simple biological organism compared to maybe 50 different crops of plant. So you should actually be encouraging the clever students to do horticulture and agriculture. But that's definitely not the case in the UK. If it is the case in other countries, then let me know. Obviously, in Holland, Wageningen University, the horticultural university, is one of the top universities in Holland, if not in Europe, and it's the premier university for horticulture. So it'd be interesting to know how horticulture is seen in Holland or in, say, California compared to is in the UK, where it's definitely much seen as the place where you put the kids who are failing. They, fail the GCSEs, their high school diploma, and then they go off to FE college, further education college, and do a horticulture course, which is very, very disheartening. Let me know your thoughts. Pretty controversial, but interested to know if you've got any other experiences or seen how hydroponics is used in schools to different effects. I think green walls, green roofs, things like this is a massive opportunity, especially if we're going to be good if we can embed them into schools and design schools around them. Imagine if you had green walls in the architectural plans of schools when they're being built. That would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Okay, that's been enough for Hydroponics Daily for today. If you found it interesting, please give an Apple Podcast review. And if you're not on Apple, then don't give a review because it's useless. Any other platform doesn't work. But if you could, check out utrema.co.uk and check out the periodic table of plant health and download your own copy. Say if you're a school or if you're one of our customers, I can send you a hard copy. Not if you buy like a £12 bottle of seaweed, you're not getting a free copy because it cost me £20 to print. But if you're an existing customer and you do big volumes with us, then I'll send you a poster. I'm not on here claiming I'm going to give a free poster out to anyone, but you can certainly get a free download and print it yourself. Go on, check out utrema.co.uk or just Google Utrema periodic table of plant health. Thank you very much for listening. Until next time, goodbye.